Welcome back to Pod of the Century. Galen Clavio, Patrick Feltz over there joining us on the show. Might have Danny Leaves joining us a little bit later. The invite's out. We're hoping to see him. But Patrick, we're going to talk about the final games from Groups A and B of the World Cup. A big one that we're definitely going to spend a lot of time on. USA knocks out Iran 1-0. We'll also talk about England. We'll talk about Senegal. We'll talk about the Netherlands. First of all, how are you doing? Good to see you.
I'm doing fantastic. It's certainly tough to not be doing well after what we saw from the Americans today. A tough, hard-fought victory. But other than that, really exciting day of games. The great thing about these two window games, and I think we'll see this throughout the week, is typically one of the games, all right, there's a team who's clinched and one team who's either out or a team who has a pretty little shot of getting through. But the other game for that second spot, and I think pretty much every single one of these groups, is really competitive. And we got to see two of those today with Ecuador, Senegal, and the U.S. and Iran.
Yeah, and let's start right off with USA-Iran, as this was, I've been through now, I'm old enough that I've been through several elimination games for the U.S. as they have a chance to go through. And this one is right up there with 2010, that game that they played against Algeria, the final game of that group stage, where you're just hanging on for dear life the whole time. Now that game in 2010 was a little bit different. No goals. It was just like white-knuckle the entire time, and then they get that cathartic goal at the end that Donovan scores. This one, the U.S. was on the front foot kind of from the beginning. They really tried to take the game to the Iranians, which I think was a smart move. They absolutely needed to do that, and we saw a lot of what we loved out of this USA team offensively in the first half of the game versus Wales, and really in the first half of the game versus England, where they were just all over the place. It was basically very similar to how Canada approached their matches thus far. The difference being the U.S. was also getting excellent defensive play. And, those two items in synergy, really put the U.S. in a position where it felt like they were dominating things. They had several good chances that they didn't convert on. And I think everybody, I certainly, after a while was like, my God, they're just not going to score. And the epitaph.
Same way.
Yeah. The epitaph of this World Cup is going to be, well, the U.S. played really good defense, but they didn't have anybody to score goals. But then Captain America comes through. Christian Pulisic scores in the 38th minute, and I think destroys his balls at the same time. We hope he's okay. We've heard it's some kind of a pelvic contusion. I think he's fine, but
he says he's playing in his Snapchat. So.
I think they would have to they'd have to give him like a horse tranquilizer for him to be out on the field on Saturday. But just a huge moment for the U.S. Initially thought it was offside, and it was not. And just a brilliant movement of the ball. And Christian puts it in the back of the net. What was your reaction when you saw that goal?
Finally was the answer for me. It was about time they got one through. A lot of great chances. I don't even think Pulisic's goal that he ended up scoring, which was a great goal. I think it was a really nice ball. McKennie Dest Pulisic. It was a great goal, and he collides with the goalkeeper, takes a shot to the groin. I think they were calling it what was the injury they called it?
They called it it was like a pelvic contusion.
Yes, pelvic contusion. Okay, yeah.
If it's a hip pointer, that didn't look like any hip pointer I've ever seen. Anyway, yes,
I agree with you there. But hey, he was taken to the hospital after the game. Put on his social media that he's playing Saturday no matter what. So I don't think it's going to be an issue. But it was due for a goal because they had several chances before that. I think the one that sticks out to me is Weah puts one on, and it just sails above the goal. Looked like a good look, too. I know Sargent had some. There were some where passes just a foot ahead. Guy gets a leg in there, knocks it away. So many so close calls that I felt like are going to haunt me for the rest of the night, rest of the next 4 years. But it ends up Pulisic buries that one. And he comes back into the game, too, after the injury, which I still think is kind of absurd that he did that, even if it was just for 4 or 5 minutes and he didn't really touch the ball or do much on defense. It's on the smart move. But
yeah, well, and look, there was clearly a lot of dopamine running through his system at that.
Yes. But he didn't get a celebration out of it, though.
I know that was he deserved that. I mean, you made a good point though. I mean, I think the U.S. was a little too cute in the final third. Always like one too many passes or one too many dribbles going in the opposite direction. But that said, they almost scored a second goal.
Yes.
I still am not entirely. I know there's like automated offside technology. That was about the closest margin for an offside call that we've seen so far in this tournament. Way it looked like he was on, and a brilliant job of kind of rounding the keeper and getting the ball past him, and it ended up being for naught. But USA goes into half with a 1-0 lead. You felt pretty good, but you knew Iran was going to come at you. And this was where, there was some criticism of Berhalter after the fact because he really kind of steered into the defensive shell after about 25 minutes. It was partially a decision, I think, made by Sargent getting injured. He got kind of crumpled on the left wing during an offensive move. But McKinney goes out and Acosta comes in. They pull out Serginho Dest and put Shaq Moore in. Weah comes out for Zimmerman. They go to basically 5 at the back.
Yep.
And that was when the roller coaster really started because Iran. Yeah, I was looking at Bill Connolly's statistical tweet, and Iran, I think almost all of their XG came in like the last 8 minutes of the game, including, a couple of attempts that looked like they were destined for goal. There was a free kick. There was another one that squirts through the legs of Matt Turner and somehow just stops right behind him. Just some real crazy moments that just had your heart in your mouth.
Yeah, you mentioned it. That one that got past Turner, I thought that was going in. I really, truly thought that was going to dribble in. But Walker Zimmerman, right place, right time, that sub. And Berhalter, I think, was smart to have that 5 in the back because without Zimmerman in the game there, that's an Iranian goal. And we're even, and we're singing a different tune about the Americans right now. So that ended up being, I think, a huge difference maker. And that substitution with Zimmerman, he brought some fresh legs on. I think he made a big difference. But the defense in general today was great until those final 15 minutes, which were nerve-wracking to say the least and terrifying to say the most. But I don't even think that was the defense. I think that was just Iran really playing a game with their backs against the wall and knowing we have to get something here. That was all the might Iran had. That was everything they got.
Yeah.
And the U.S. still stopped it. They could, just like they thwarted a really great English attack. And I was impressed today, I think, most by the 2 center backs, or 2, and then I guess it ended up being 3. But the 2 who we saw for most of the game, in Tim Ream, who's been fantastic all tournament, and Cameron Carter-Vickers, who, again, another clean sheet today. And only, by the way, for the U.S., all tournament long, 1 goal, and it was a penalty. They haven't let 1 goal in play, which has been great, and Turner's played well too. But today, Carter Vickers, I've got his name on the back of my shirt right now. He's a tank. He's a fridge. You try and come at him down into the box, and we saw it a couple times. There was an Iranian player who, speaking of a nut shot to Pulisic, there was one to the Iranian guy earlier in the match, just a few minutes before. The guy's just running. Carter Vickers is standing there. He bumps into him. The guy's legs come together so hard that they scissor together, and the guy falls to the ground.
Some real vice grip action that you really don't want there. Absolutely. No, and I mean, Cameron Vickers, I mean, I'm a Spurs guy. I mean, we had high hopes for him. It never quite worked out at Spurs, but
he's been great in Scotland and great in the Champions League.
He has. Well, and I think the biggest surprise, though, is that was the first time that center back pairing had played together ever for the United States men's national team, which, Patrick, you generally don't want to make a debut in your center back pairing in a decisive game in the World Cup. And yet, as much as Greg Berhalter has taken a lot of grief for a lot of different things, and he's still getting grief. I mean, I'm posting about the victory, and people are like, well, what about Gio Reyna? And I'm like, are we really asking about Gio Reyna's disposition after advancing through the group stage? I mean, there's a time and a place, folks. I mean, you've got to give Berhalter a lot of credit, because I think if you went into this World Cup looking honestly at the United States, you said to yourself, this is a team that is going to probably struggle to stop opposing goal scorers. And they had a bunch of really awesome goal scorers lined up against them. Obviously, Gareth Bale in the first game. Harry Kane and Marcus Rashford and the whole complement of English players in that second game. And then today, Iran has shown an ability to score goals. And as you mentioned, they let up 0 goals during the regular flow of play. The one goal they let up on a penalty in the first game. They have gone, 190, 200 some minutes without allowing a goal.
With a bunch of stoppage time too.
Yeah,
and so 12 of it in the second half, more or less. It was 9 that turned into 12.
So whatever. And I think certainly that you've got to give a tremendous amount of credit to Tyler Adams. You got to give a lot of credit to Dest. What Berhalter has done with the defense and the way that they've played. It hasn't always looked pretty, but it's been very effective against a variety of really good players. And Absolutely. So, the big question mark for the U.S. I think still remains: can they score goals? And that's going to become increasingly more important as you go into this next game, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But let's just take a second, take a step back and say, yes, the U.S. was supposed to go through. And yes, they had a winner-take-all match here, essentially, except it wasn't, because Iran had the safety of being able to draw the game. The U.S. had to decisively win it. But Iran's a good team. And I think they showed that in the way that they played. They didn't play very well against England, but for them to bounce back the way they did against Wales, and then for the way that they played through most of the game today, that's a talented older team that knows Absolutely. How to play on that international stage. And for the U.S. to roll out the youngest squad in the World Cup and not have a clear goal scorer, not have a clear defensive setup, and somehow cobble together a culture that allowed them to pick up the victory here and move on, I do think is a pretty big accomplishment. And it certainly gets USA Soccer back on track.
Absolutely
in a way that didn't seem conceivable 4 years ago when they're sitting at home while watching what's going on in Russia.
Yeah, and speaking of watching what's going on in Russia, the Dutch, who they'll play Saturday, pair of teams who didn't make it last time, who are back on track here. But I think this was huge for U.S. Soccer in general, just getting back to the World Cup and being able to say, we can get to the knockouts and maybe even win a game in the knockouts, win a game or two. I think they really do have a shot. There hasn't been a team in this tournament so far that's looked unbeatable to me. I really think we see it every single time that the tournament isn't held in Europe or South America. Crazy results tend to happen. Why not the U.S.? The way they're playing right now on defense, why not? And I think that the goal scoring is going to be a question. We'll see if Pulisic's fit. We'll see what that looks like. I think that there needs to be a conversation about Jesus Ferreira potentially playing at some point. I know Berhalter really loved him in qualifying and in friendlies and in Nations League and stuff like that. So, and he had a good MLS season for FC Dallas. So I'd like to see Jesus Ferreira play some. I think he'd be better than what we've seen from Haji Wright so far, who has really struggled out there. And Sargent's been fine. I don't see why not give Ferreira a shot if you need someone to really try out there.
I mean, the pre-match rumor was that he was going to be on the starter
sheet. That was my expectation too, and I was surprised to see Sargent out there, and I was really surprised to see Haji Wright come in.
Yeah, but I will say I thought Sargent played really well. He had a couple of misplaced passes, and you would like to see him take more shots on goal. He ended up acting more as a facilitator, but
he got to his spots.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting because I will say the very minimal number of changes that we have seen out of Berhalter's lineup so far. He's got a few days to rest the squad, but he really seems to be prizing consistency, and maybe there's something to that in this World Cup. Maybe this particular group really does need to just kind of stick together. So we'll see. Let's go ahead and talk about Netherlands quickly because there wasn't much to say about that match. They wipe out Qatar, who has officially the worst host experience of any World Cup host, deservedly so, probably, as they get. They get. I mean, it wasn't really much of a game. They lose. Netherlands beats Qatar 2-0. You get. I mean, I think likely Cody Gakpo's Dutch team. Who does he play for? PSV Eindhoven.
Yep.
They had to love how many extra zeros that goal added to his transfer fee to Liverpool. Yes. It'll be coming up here any minute now. But he's at certainly a breakout tournament, and I think has really made his name on the world stage. And then Frankie de Jong responds to people continually asking him about transfers by scoring another goal in the second half, easily through for the Netherlands. And It's interesting because this Netherlands squad, on the one hand, I mean, they won the group, and you have to give them credit for that. On the other hand, it wasn't the most impressive of experiences for the Netherlands. On the one hand, they beat Senegal 2-0, and that looks more and more impressive, especially with what happened today. On the other hand, they drew with Ecuador and really looked bad in that game. And even in that game versus Senegal, it took until very late for the Netherlands to pick up the goals that they needed for the victory. It's a good Netherlands squad. It's not an all-timer. This really feels like one of those mid-table European squads that happened to be in a group that like specifically couldn't handle their skill set. How do you think about that matchup between the USA and the Netherlands in the round of 16 on Saturday?
Well, first of all, these are two pot two teams when they were drawn into this tournament. Qatar gets the pot one treatment as the host country. So the Dutch get drawn into an easy group, I think, kind of by default. They were a pot two team who got to play a three team and a pair of fours. And honestly, calling Qatar a four team would be generous. Today, it looked like the Dutch were on autopilot. I think they could have played better if they wanted to, but they didn't need to. They had the points they needed. They were through already. I wasn't particularly impressed throughout any of these matches. And I think what we see in this match against Ecuador is that, that this is a team who they can get off to a fast start sometimes, but really, I think is absolutely beatable for the U.S. And Ecuador played well this tournament. And Senegal, you said it, that win continues to look more impressive. But this wasn't a very challenging group for the Dutch. I don't think they're as battle tested as the U.S. are. We saw the U.S. against the English. That's a very tough match. And I'd say Iran is about as tough as any team in that Group A. Group A coming in, we knew was going to be the weakest group in this entire tournament. I think maybe if the Dutch haven't been playing nearly as tough as the U.S., there's one theory that says, okay, they're going to have more gas in the tank Saturday, but there's another that says they aren't as prepared for Saturday. I think my thought is this, though. I said it earlier, but there's no team in this tournament that I think is a runaway favorite right now. I couldn't begin to have a guess who's going to win this. I guess Brazil's looked the best, but even we saw it in their second match, didn't look all that impressive until the end. So right now, you could tell me that the Dutch spin out to the Americans. You could also tell me they make it to the semifinal. Neither would surprise me right now. They've got the talent to beat just about anybody. I don't think that's a question with the way Gakpo is playing, especially.
Yeah,
he really has been the breakout young star of the tournament. And I think if the Dutch have a nice run here, that guy could potentially be looking at a most outstanding young player award. I think he's potentially an odds-on favorite for that. But this is going to be, in my opinion, the toughest test the Dutch have faced all tournament. I think the U.S. are better than a Senegalese team without their best player. I think they're certainly better than Qatar, and I think they're better than Ecuador, even if Enner Valencia was playing out of his mind in those first two games. But
I think that's the key.
Yeah, I think this is a really tough test for both teams. I'm excited to see it.
As a team, I think the U.S. has played really well throughout all the games thus far, and that's going to be the interesting thing. I mean, the Dutch are a fascinating squad in that they have the name brand, and it's like the U.S. loses to the Netherlands in the round of 16. Like there's no shame in that in any year. But it is, it's interesting because this is a much younger U.S. squad. I mean, you look at the lineup, the players that started multiple games for the Dutch in the group stage. I mean, you've got Memphis Depay, who's relatively young among the group at 28. You've got Martin de Roon, who's 31. You've got Klaassen, who's 29. You've got Virgil van Dijk, who's not only 31 but is getting a little creaky.
Yes.
They're just, with the exception, obviously, of Gakpo, who's a young, dynamic player. It is a little bit older. Now that can play in both ways. Sometimes you got more experience, you've got more miles, you've gotten a lot of tournament experience, whether it's in the Euros or whatever, and that pays dividends. On the other hand, if the U.S. can play with the high level of energy that they've played with, and they can negate the goal-scoring opportunities of the Netherlands' best players because of their defensive approach,
just like they did to the English.
Right. Then, and the one difference there is going to be the English didn't have to get a result out of that game. They needed a draw. And the Netherlands obviously will need more than that in this knockout stage game. But it is not a bridge too far. And certainly I think, a lot of people looked at that draw and said, well, gosh, even if the U.S. gets through, they're in real trouble because they're going to have to go up against the Dutch. And it's like, it might not be that bad. So
I agree.
We'll see. Anyway, the other games that occurred today that are worth mentioning, we'll start with the other blowout game, which, of course, was England 3, Wales 0. I was wrong about this game when I was doing my preview yesterday. I thought, well, gosh, this is Wales Super Bowl. They're getting to play their colonizer, basically.
Yes.
And they get the opportunity to kind of show out on the international stage for the last time, basically, with Gareth Bale. And, I mean, look, I'll be the first to say, as you said when you got on here, I didn't watch very much of this match at all. I've gone back and caught bits and pieces, but this was a clear, just overwhelming victory for the English. They outshoot the Welsh 18-7. They have 7 shots on goal to Wales' 1. Just not close at all. You get Marcus Rashford, who comes in and scores twice. Phil Foden, who everybody's been clamoring for, he comes in and scores. And, the only thing the English didn't get in this game essentially was a goal for Harry Kane. And that's fine. They got a chance to sub Harry Kane out early. Callum Wilson got some run. They got Trent Alexander-Arnold in at right back, which allowed him to get some run. And, I think for England, this went about as well as it could have possibly gone, because as many questions as had been generated in the English press about this England team and the conservative way that they approach that game versus the USA, none of that will be present after obliterating Wales and securing first place in the group.
No, it won't at all. This is a game where I had a second screen on it, caught bits and pieces of it. I see Rashford score that first goal in the 50th minute. I was pretty surprised, first of all, that this was tied going into the half, because England looked like they'd gotten all the chances, had all the possession, and really just dominated it. And I was, hey, good for the Welsh to keep it tied for a half, keep it competitive. It kind of felt like an Indiana football game against Ohio State or Michigan, where, well, hey, they're in it at halftime, and then suddenly the wheels fall off and the more talented team wins out in the end. And that's what happened here. I see that first Rashford goal go in, 50th minute. Okay, they're on the board. This felt over. And then I look back at the U.S. match and just got one eyeball on the other screen, and I see Foden celebrating with the guys again. And, okay, are they showing a replay of the celebration? What's going on here? Why would you be showing that? That seems a little weird. Why would you show that? And then I look at the scoreboard, 2-0. Oh, they scored literally a minute later. And then it went from over to really over. Rashford scores again about 20 minutes later, and that's it. Really, this is what the English needed, I think, after all the questions raised after the American result, the draw. I think getting a really decisive victory here makes that, number one, look a lot more impressive for the U.S. And number two, it makes the English team, the English fans, feel a whole lot better about their team, knowing that, no, it wasn't just a one-game wonder against Iran. This team can actually score goals at will and has the offensive attack to hang with anybody in the world.
They will face off in the round of 16 against Senegal, who comes back from basically being discounted by everybody due to injury concerns, and comes back from losing the first game in the group stage to winning the group, or not winning the group, finishing second in the group, but winning the game against Ecuador. Ecuador, a team that a lot of people got really excited about early on, and we're really focused on, hey, this is a team that can do something. They just had about the worst game that you could have today in that game, and Senegal deserves a ton of credit as they were able to press the action early. They end up picking up a goal early on in this one, relatively speaking, at least. And that leads to a situation where Ecuador's got to scramble in the second half. You do get a goal out of Ecuador. Moise Caicedo ends up scoring a nice goal off a volley, and it looks at that point like Ecuador, they've come back, they've secured things. But then a free kick that comes up a bit later from Koulibaly in the back of the net. Senegal back up 2-1, and that was essentially it. Ecuador could never pierce the Senegalese defense effectively the rest of the way. This was not something that was on our dance cards, Patrick, as we headed into this, as the absence of Sadio Mane really felt like it was going to take the bottom out of this Senegalese opportunity. But all credit in the world to them. The African teams in general have really played almost flawless tournaments in terms of what the best case scenario would be. They've played with style and with passion. They've played with a lot of headiness, and they have taken advantage of defensive lapses and set piece lapses from UEFA teams, from CONMEBOL teams. And in this one, I honestly thought Ecuador was going to cruise to victory here. That Senegal was able to pick this up and walk away with second place in the group is a real testament to what they've been able to put together with their team during this tournament.
It absolutely is. I was really impressed by that. This is a fun game, too. Good one to get up for in that 10 a.m. window. First of all, they get the penalty. I think that's the right call. Clear penalty to me. So they have that 1-0 halftime lead, and Ecuador evens things up. I think we're in for a really good game. And then right away, Senegal takes it back. And those fans, what an awesome celebration.
Yeah.
Just so happy for them, first of all. That's part of the joy of this tournament. And you forget that every 4 years is seeing the pure, incomparable just joy, celebrating all these incredible moments for these nations that rarely get to experience stuff like this on a global stage. So for Senegal, and I saw some of the scenes back in the nation, really, really cool. So there's that too. But I was impressed with them. And you're right about that. They play tough. And they play a really together, heady brand of football. Like you said, they really do kind of emphasize all those traits that make the African teams in this tournament so tough to knock out. And I think we've seen it with some of the other ones. Ghana in particular, I've really liked what I've seen from them. Yeah, I think Senegal going forward, I don't know if they have the talent to make an England match winnable, but they're going to try. I know that much. I know that they're going to give it their all. Yep. And will that be enough without Sadio Mane? Probably not. But hey, they are going to give it their all. I know that much. And just getting to the knockouts without your best player, I think, is an achievement in and of itself.
It's going to be fascinating because I agree with you. I think the English have more than enough quality that they should be able to see off Senegal, especially since there is not a decisive goal scorer on the front end of things. And I just have a hard time seeing the English defense having as many problems with Senegal as Ecuador did. But that said, I'll say that the one thing about Senegal that I would worry about is they play with a lot of passion, they play with a lot of pace, and England, if they give up an early goal because of a lot of pressure that they're facing, or maybe they give up something on a counterattack, which frankly, I mean, we've seen Ghana take advantage of that. We've seen some other teams take advantage of just playing against high lines and being able to break through and outrun the opposition defenders. That's where I could see something problematic. But no, it would be really surprising if England didn't come away with a victory and book a spot to the quarterfinals.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
We'll
see the way that their attack played today and in the Iran match, when they're not facing a crazy, I'm saying this out loud, world-class defense like the United States of America.
Yeah. It's like, you can say, well, the English didn't need a result like I did a little while ago, but it's like at the end of the day, they demolished Iran and they demolished Wales and they didn't demolish the United States.
No.
So yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Anyway, before we wrap up, let's talk quickly about the games tomorrow. Early window, we've got Group D, and this is Australia versus Denmark in one game and Tunisia versus France in the other one. Now, the scenarios here, France already is through. They don't have to do anything. And in fact, they haven't won the group yet, but it will, this is where it gets interesting, because does France want to win the group or do they want to be second in the group? And there's some rationale for whether you'd want to be one or the other. And a lot of it depends on what happens in Group C, which I'll get to.
Well, you don't want to play Argentina.
You don't want to play Argentina. So here are basically the scenarios for tomorrow. So France, like we said, they qualified with one game to spare. France wins the group with a win or a draw versus Tunisia, or if Australia doesn't beat Denmark, and they can actually still win the group even if they lose and Australia wins. So that's, so I would be really surprised at this point if the French didn't win the group, which might actually be the worst thing for them. But we'll see. Australia qualifies if they beat Denmark. If they lose, they're eliminated. So basically, they have the exact same scenario in front of them that the U.S. had today versus Iran, except they qualify with a tie unless Tunisia beats France. If Tunisia beats France and Australia draws, then goal differential comes in. Denmark qualifies if they beat Australia unless Tunisia beats France and wins the tiebreaker. So, and then Tunisia qualifies if they beat France, but only if the other game is either a tie or a Denmark win, and then they would still need the tiebreaker at that point. So Tunisia's got some trouble here. And, so basically it looks like it's going to be France and then whoever wins that Australia-Denmark game. How do you see this playing out?
Well, first of all, I will say Tunisia's got something to play for. They're playing against, you've mentioned it before, feels like it's been a trend in this tournament. They're colonizers.
Yes.
Forever, Tunisia was a French territory. They don't have the quality of the French side, but I certainly think they will be playing with fire in this game, with their backs against the wall for sure. I don't see them coming anywhere close to beating this French team, who have really somehow beaten all of the allegations of a potential group stage curse that has already, in 2018, got to the Germans. 2014, we saw it with Spain. We've seen it, Italy, 2010. The curse has been real, and the French have absolutely bucked it, and in decisive fashion as well.
Yeah.
Maybe it comes back to bite them in the first round of the group stage if they draw the Argentinians, like it's looking fairly likely they will. Although I think there is still a few scenarios where Argentina doesn't make it, although unlikely. But how likely was it Argentina would lose to Saudi Arabia?
Yeah. Now, the Group C is an absolute mess.
Yes.
I'm not going to try to describe all of the potential scenarios, but suffice it to say, those games are going on afterwards. So France is kind of like throwing a dart and hoping they hit the proper thing here, because so you got Poland, Argentina, and Saudi Arabia, Mexico going on at 2:00. And basically, let me start from the bottom and work up. Mexico has to win, and then Poland has to beat Argentina. And they would go through at that point. If they win and any other result happens, there'd be a tiebreaker for second place. So Mexico basically can only win if they tie or they lose to Saudi Arabia. They're done. Saudi Arabia advances with a win over Mexico. They can still top the group if Poland and Argentina draw. They can also advance with a draw if Poland beats Argentina, but they're eliminated with a draw if Poland and Argentina draw. Argentina qualifies with a win against Poland, also advances with a tie unless Saudi Arabia wins against Mexico. And then it goes into this whole series of tiebreakers. And then Poland qualifies if they win or draw against Argentina. And they can win the group with a victory or with a draw if Saudi Arabia draws or loses. Poland can also lose and not necessarily be eliminated, but then we get back into the tiebreakers. So essentially, I have no clue what's going to happen in this group. I don't think anybody does. But there is the possibility here of one of those, oh my God, I can't believe that game's happening in the round of 16 results. If you get, for instance, France winning the group and Argentina finishing second, or vice versa, where Argentina ends up winning the group and France finishes second in theirs because they rest a bunch of people or something like that. So a lot of intrigue, to say the least, in Group C and how it relates to Group D.
Absolutely there is. And you explained that very succinctly for something so unbelievably and terribly confusing as the potential results here in Group C. It's chaos. It's pure chaos. In that 2 p.m. slate, I think 2 screens are almost required, and equal attention on both of them is almost required to attempt to even get a bit of an idea as to what's going on here. And I think the announcers are almost going to have to stop themselves from commentating the match about every 5 seconds to let you know, well, if this holds, then here's what happens, and here's who's playing who. But hey, and they're attacking it. Oh, but if they got the goal there, then they would be doing this. It's going to be a mess, and I'm really excited to see it. That's the beauty of this tournament sometimes is just when you get these two games going on at the same time, you're spinning the slot machine as to what is going to happen. You have utterly no idea. It's chaos. It's crazy. Last second goals can change everything. Everything you think is going to happen isn't going to happen. Expect the unexpected. That's the beauty of the World Cup. And I think we've said it enough times. This has been a tournament of a lot of unexpected. Obviously, in this group, Saudi Arabia beating Argentina, unexpected. And in the last group we talked about, Denmark's poor performance so far after how they did in Euro 2020, unexpected and really disappointing, and something that, hey, they might not have a chance to correct against Australia tomorrow. They've got to win that. But in Group C, I didn't expect Poland here, who I, for your class, did a report on.
You were pretty down on the polls, man. So
I didn't expect them to be atop this group here going into the third match day because I didn't expect Argentina to lose a match. And I expected Mexico to put up a bit more of a fight in their first two matches. But that's its own issue. And Mexico really, I think, has the least chance of advancing out of this group. And I think that's a shame because I think there is some real quality on this Mexican team.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird that they've been on balance like the least impressive CONCACAF team. But they're still alive, and Canada got eliminated after 2 games. So impressive doesn't always equate to what you need. And
you'd rather be here than where Canada is, without a doubt.
And look, so the one thing I'll say before we wrap up is Group E. So the point spread's always interesting. The point differential spread is always interesting going into these final group stage games. We kind of had it in Group B where you had a team with 4 points, a team with 3 points, a team with 2 points, a team with 1 point. Everybody was still in it. Wales didn't really hold up their end of the bargain. Group E has a 4-3-3-1 split, but the problem there is one of those teams, Costa Rica, is kind of been like kneecapped by the goal differential due to losing so heavily against Germany. This Group C matchup, Poland, Argentina, Saudi Arabia, Mexico, this is the biggest chaos group potential of all of them.
It's awesome.
Because the biggest goal spread is between Poland and Mexico, and that's a 4-goal spread. But those teams aren't playing each other. And so that you've got like maximal confusion potentially based upon what's going to happen throughout the 90 minutes in both games simultaneously. This is where it's really fun in the group stage. Like I love the knockouts. The knockouts are higher drama, but rarely do you get 2 things happening like this simultaneously that you have to pay attention to, and where you really don't know going in, and everybody is still alive. And that's what I really love about this scenario.
It's awesome. It's sensory overload in the best way. It's required watching. You've got to be watching both at the same time because it almost matters as much what happens on the field in a completely different stadium as it matters what's happening on the field in the game itself. And that's the beauty of the World Cup and of this style of tournament.
What a day. Go USA.
Absolutely.
They go to the second phase of things. They'll be in the knockouts on Saturday. Great win for them. Congrats to England. Congrats to Senegal. Congrats to the Netherlands. Best wishes to Iran, who played a very good game and really played an excellent tournament. We wish their players and fans the best in the aftermath of all of this. And so, Patrick, thank you. We'll be back later on in the week with Century as we'll break down the games in C and D tomorrow. Be sure to tune in either live on the IU Sports Media YouTube channel or subscribe here on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, what have you. We're out there. So anyway, for Patrick Feltz over there, I'm Galen Clavio. This has been Pod of the Century. We'll catch you folks on the flip side. So long, everybody.